Sophia Zhukova was born in 1939 in the village of Nizhny Novgorod region. She did not receive a proper education and worked as a laborer for most of her life. Sophia experienced much grief, as several of her children passed away very young. Over time, she moved to Khabarovsk, settling in the town of Beryozovka in a multi-apartment building on the second floor of House No. 2 in the 40-let Pobedi quarter. Before retiring, she worked as a laborer at a meat processing plant. Strong and tough for her age, Zhukova had a raspy voice that earned her the nickname Sophia the Horse among the locals. She married and had 2 sons, who, according to rumors, both worked in law enforcement. For years, the quiet pensioner lived with her family on the city's outskirts, drawing no attention to herself until 2005, when her husband passed away. Whether he was a stabilizing influence or his death severely affected her psyche remains unclear. She became quarrelsome and often argued with neighbors, even threatening them with harm, though no one took her seriously, an oversight they would come to regret. People noted her cold demeanor, lack of empathy, and dislike for animals. Some accused her of alcoholism, though others said she kept herself tidy and took daily walks. In 2005, she committed her first crime. On December 14, 2005, a girl named Nastya Alexyenko was walking home from school with her friend. They parted ways at Nastya's building. She only needed to climb to the second floor to reach her grandparents' apartment, where she stayed during school days, but she never arrived. By 1:30 p.m., her grandfather became worried. After calling Nastya's friend, he learned that the last person seen with her was their elderly neighbor, 66-year-old Sophia Zhukova. Zhukova had previously scolded Nastya and her friend for being noisy in the stairwell, threatening, "I'll cut off your hands and heads." Nastya's family reported her disappearance to the police. A runaway scenario was ruled out because Nastya had a loving relationship with her family, who adored her and had never punished her harshly. The entire town of Beryozovka, including police and volunteers, searched for Nastya. Posters with her description were everywhere. After days of searching, investigators questioned Zhukova. She claimed to know Nastya well, saying the girl used to visit her when her husband was alive. They would draw together, drink tea, and Nastya had supposedly asked her not to tell her parents about the visits to avoid getting scolded. However, after her husband's death, the girl stopped visiting but would greet her on the street. Zhukova said that on the day of the disappearance, Nastya was walking ahead of her in the stairwell but ran outside after someone called her. She claimed not to have seen her since. The story seemed plausible, but Nastya's grandmother knew it was untrue. Nastya had never visited Zhukova. Why would the neighbor lie about this after the girl's disappearance? Nastya's mother received many calls after the posters were distributed, with people claiming to have seen a similar child. However, one call stood out. A woman with a distinct voice said Nastya was alive and well. Disturbed, Nastya's mother went to the police. Investigators traced the call to a phone at a local sausage shop accessible to all employees. By late December 2005, Nastya Alexyenko's disappearance was solved in the most horrifying way. On the evening of December 14th, the day she vanished, a neighbor walking her dogs near the building found chunks of fresh meat under the balconies. Thinking dog hunters had poisoned the meat, she led her dogs away and informed her mother, who alerted the police. Officers found bloodstains and bone fragments but dismissed them. On December 27th, a Khabarovsk resident stopped by a landfill in Beryozovka. He spotted a black bag dusted with snow and decided to take the meat inside for his dog. However, upon opening it, he discovered something horrific: human remains. Shocked, he immediately contacted the police and described the find. His wife and brother corroborated his story. Nastya Alexyenko's mother was called in for identification. The remains were confirmed to belong to her daughter. What the grieving mother endured is unimaginable. The gruesome crime shocked all of Khabarovsk. Yet, at the time, the perpetrator remained unknown. Gradually, life in Beryozovka returned to its normal rhythm, and the residents began to recover from the horrific events of December 2005. In March 2013, Sophia Zhukova was visited by a distant relative, 77-year-old retiree Anastasia Makieva. The woman had sold her apartment in Khabarovsk for 3 million rubles and asked to stay with Zhukova for a few weeks before moving to Moscow to live with her daughter. However, after her move, all contact with her ceased, and her daughter and niece reported her missing. Investigators quickly pieced together the circumstances of her disappearance. On March 9, 2013, when Zhukova stopped responding to her family, a postal worker came to Sonya Zhukova's apartment to deliver pensions for both women. When questioned, Zhukova claimed that Zhukova had suddenly packed her bags and said she was leaving to live with relatives in Primorye. Surprised, Zhukova allegedly tried to stop her and even grabbed the bag with her documents, but Zhukova left anyway. According to Zhukova, she saw Zhukova get into a black car and drive away. This account raised suspicions with the police, as they found small bloodstains on the wallpaper and radiator. However, Zhukova explained this by saying, "We argued about her sudden departure, her blood pressure spiked, and she had a nosebleed." Anastasia gestured actively, spreading blood around the apartment. Investigators were not convinced, especially since Zhukova's daughter stated they had no relatives in Primorye. The investigators tracked down the postal worker, who revealed that a month later, during another pension delivery, Zhukova mentioned Zhukova's disappearance. However, the postal worker doubted Zhukova's story about Zhukova getting into a car, as the apartment's windows faced a courtyard inaccessible to vehicles. Neighbors also noticed strange behavior. Zhukova was seen wearing Zhukova's clothes and discarding furniture. A crimson stain was spotted near the garbage bins. Despite these clues, Zhukova was questioned only as a witness and not detained. Rumors about a maniac, possibly even a cannibal, spread through Berezovka, flaring up with each new grim discovery, but years passed without justice being served. Then, another murder shook the town in January 2019. This time, the victim was 62-year-old janitor Vasily Shlaktich, originally from Ukraine. After his partner kicked him out, he temporarily moved in with a familiar landlord for a fee of 10,000 rubles. Unfortunately for him, that landlord was Sonya Zhukova. She kindly agreed to house him, but on January 28, he disappeared without a trace. His absence was noted when he didn't show up for work. This time, the police quickly identified a suspect. Neighbors living below Zhukova reported hearing heavy thuds from her apartment around 2 a.m. On January 29, they described the sounds as if someone was striking with an axe, accompanied by a man's groans and then louder blows. Shortly after, they heard Zhukova washing the floor. One of the neighbors considered confronting her but was dissuaded by his wife, a decision he later credited with saving his life. "What if I had walked in while she was chopping up her victim? She could have hit me with the axe too," he recounted. The next morning, the same neighbors saw Zhukova heading toward the garbage bins with a tightly packed bag. That evening, similar noises were heard from her apartment. Days later, 2 schoolgirls discovered human remains near a heating pipeline. Investigators linked the discovery to Shlaktich's disappearance and the neighbors' accounts. His former partner identified the remains, and Sonya Zhukova was arrested. Despite her advanced age, Zhukova proved physically strong, resisting 5 police officers during her arrest. Known for her strength, she could single-handedly remove cast iron radiators during home renovations. During a search of her apartment, investigators found numerous blood traces, including on an axe blade and saws. Zhukova denied everything, claiming she didn't know Shlaktich and had only seen him drinking a few days earlier. She explained the noise as chopping bones for soup and said the blood came from her missing relative, Anastasia Zhukova. This time, her stories failed to secure her release. She was detained in a pre-trial detention center for Shlaktich's murder. Weeks later, she offered a new account, claiming that Shlaktich and another man came to her house for tea and assaulted her. She said one man fled while she struck Shlaktich with an axe in self-defense. While she gave her statement, investigators continued connecting dots, suspecting her involvement in other crimes in Berezovka, all of which pointed to Sonya Zhukova. Witnesses underwent additional questioning about all previous crimes, and a more thorough search was conducted in the suspect's apartment. During this search, traces of blood were found under the linoleum. Forensic analysis revealed that the blood belonged to the distant relative who had supposedly moved to Primorye. Meanwhile, the suspect found her time in the detention center unpleasant. In February, she was placed in a cell with 2 other detainees. Initially, Zhukova tried to convince them that she was being falsely accused of the janitor's death. However, after some time, she opened up to her cellmates and confessed to killing Vasily Shlaktich and Anastasia Zhukova, detailing how she dismembered their bodies and disposed of the remains in parts. The most horrifying confession was about little Nastya Alexenko. Zhukova admitted to throwing the remains off her balcony so that the dogs would scatter them. Her cellmates immediately reported this to the investigators. Soon after, Zhukova herself confessed, providing detailed accounts of each crime, including the motives and methods used. She described everything, from the initial attacks to the disposal of the remains. However, a few months later, she attempted to retract her statements, claiming she had confessed under pressure. By then, investigators had gathered sufficient evidence to confidently assert her guilt in all three cases. During the trial, the bloodthirsty grandmother frequently laughed and mocked the mother of her first victim, Nastya Alexenko. "We searched the entire area, every basement, every inch of the city. And it turned out the answer was right next door, behind a neighbor's door." Zhukova calmly looked me in the eyes. "No one suspected her at the time. But I haven't known a day of peace in all these 15 years, said Nastya's mother, Natalia Alexenko. She added that during the trial, Zhukova described the argument over loud conversations in the stairwell, how she dragged Nastya into her apartment by the scruff of her neck, and how she struck her from behind, all in chilling detail. The ordeal, including the trial, severely affected Natalia's health. Senior investigator Adelia Vergazova, who worked on the Shlaktich case, explained that Zhukova wasn't detained earlier because there was no evidence connecting her to the first two murders at the time. But with new evidence and Zhukova's confessions, there was no doubt about her guilt. The motives for killing Makiva and Shlaktich were domestic disputes, while her conflict with Nastya Alexenko stemmed from noise complaints. After each crime, Zhukova packed the remains in bags and disposed of them either in dumpsters near her home or in various locations around Berezovka. A forensic psychological and psychiatric examination declared her sane, confirming that she committed the crimes knowingly. The motives were trivial, reflecting her irritable character. Investigators found no evidence linking her to other crimes. During the trial, the grandmother often insulted witnesses, laughed openly, and made it clear she felt no remorse. She interrupted proceedings with shouts of "You're lying," and taunted participants with sarcastic remarks. She even loudly ordered Vasily Shlaktich's partner, Natalia, to shut up. When Natalia spoke about Vasily, Zhukova's mood visibly improved. She smiled and laughed aloud, sometimes covering her mouth when it got too loud. Natalia described Vasily as a kind, hardworking man from Ukraine with one flaw: he drank. A drinking binge in January 2019 led to a quarrel, after which Natalia kicked him out. He started renting a room from Zhukova, telling Natalia that she swore a lot and was unpleasant. Vasily planned to return to Ukraine and was saving money, but he disappeared, his phone turned off. Zhukova speculated that he refused intimacy with her and dismissed him angrily. In 2020, Zhukova contracted COVID-19. She was taken under guard to Khabarovsk City Hospital No. 10, where she died on December 29 at the age of 81 from complications related to the virus. She died before a verdict was reached. Zhukova became the oldest and most cold-blooded serial killer in Russian and Soviet history. Even in her final moments, she showed no remorse. Over the course of the trial, she gained worldwide notoriety. British and American tabloids nicknamed her the Russian Granny Ripper. On January 19, 2021, the Khabarovsk Regional Court ruled on her case posthumously, finding her guilty of 3 murders, including that of a minor. Serial crimes by women are exceedingly rare, but the chilling story of Sonya the Ripper will be whispered in hushed voices. A tale of a serial killer who lived not in some distant country but in a small settlement near Khabarovsk.